Shiloh, we are going to take a few minutes here to Well, hello, Shiloh. We are going to take a few minutes here we're going to kind of continue a little bit from where we were on Sunday. There was a few things that I wanted to add in that I want to bridge that with what the next lesson will be about. But it's dealing with the subject of serpents and dealing with what they represent. And that I won't go over that. If you didn't catch that, you can go back and rewatch that. But I want to kind of talk about Moses, continuing with this idea of Moses, and Moses had to pick up his serpent. If you remember what the lesson was about, Moses' disbelief in God led him to the rod turning into the serpent. He ran from that, which is, we talked about the young man, and then beyond that, he dropped the rod. God told him to pick it up. So that was the next phase, and I would look at that as the beginning of the chapter of the wise man. And so Moses had to pick up the serpent after God had told him to, and then after he picked up his serpent, it became the rod of God. From that point on, it was no longer just a rod; it was the rod of God. So that rod would be with Moses for the rest of his life, and what was once feared and what was once a serpent, God said, pick it up. And so that idea is something that I think is applicable to us today, and what the serpent actually is for us, and that sin in your life that stops you from following the Lord. And so in that case, in Moses' case, it was that idea of disbelief, like he didn't believe the Lord, right? And so God said, they're going to hearken to your voice. And Moses said, no, the children of the Hebrews are not going to hearken to my voice. First thing God said is, what is that in your hand? It's a rod. God says, drop it. And Moses drops it, turns into a serpent. So the idea that this rod was just a rod, but it's a revealing of a serpent. And in that case, a revealing of a disbelief, is the way I would look at that. But another passage I wanted to dive into would be, we're going to go to Numbers, but let's start off in Proverbs 7:26. Keeping everything Proverbs centric, in how this young man, this wise man, and this man of understanding are our phases in life. We're sort of diving into next is that we've talked so far about the idea of following God's will and God's path for our life. But what we don't talk about is what happens when the strange woman gets a hold of you. And so that's kind of where we're venturing off into next. But I want to kind of start off with Proverbs 7:26, and that is, for she hath cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her. And we did mention this in our last lesson, but for she hath cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her. A couple key words in there that I've talked about were wounded, and obviously the strong men. That's who she's hunting. That's what the precious life that she seeks. And if you're not doing anything with your life, if you're not pursuing God's will with your life, she already has you, right? And I will say this too, is that she gets you to be tied down with the cords of your sin, as Proverbs talks about. Once you're tied down with your own cords of your sin, she lets go. I mean, at that point, you're your own stumbling block. But we'll kind of get to that. I'm truthfully very excited about the next couple of lessons we'll be doing. But specifically the next one, because I think the next one deals a lot with the red herring, but also future projects we could do. And I will explain that. I also want to say too, is that going forward, I would like to mention the red herring a lot less, because I like this series that we're doing, and I don't want to oversell something to you. So I'm going to kind of hold back on mentioning the red herring, but I want to build these principles, if we can, in our minds and see them in scripture, so that when we watch the red herring, it will mean something different. And I don't want to preface the film much beyond that. But anyway, we talked about the wounded. Yea, many strong men have been slain by her. That point of wound is kind of what we're going to somewhat deal with. And we're still going back to Moses here in this idea of the serpents. Not the rod, but we're going down later in his life. We're going to Numbers 21. If you go to Numbers 21 and verse 4, it says, talking about Moses and the Hebrew children. And they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to compass the land of Edom, and the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way. Now, this point of the story, what's actually happening is the Moses and the Hebrew children are having to circle back, and so they're tired. Let me just go to what Gill explains this. He says Gill's commentary on this is, and he quotes the verse, "And the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way." And then Gill exclaims, "Because it was going back instead of going forward to Canaan's land. And because of the length of the way, it was a roundabout way they were going. When they could have been admitted to have passed through the country of Edom, the way would have been short. And had they pursued their victory over the Canaanite, they would have gone directly into the land." So they were like right on the cusp of getting to go into Canaan land. "And this perhaps was what fretted, vexed, and discouraged them, that they were obliged to go back and to take such a circuit when they had such an opportunity of entering, and they might be distressed also with the badness and the roughness of the way of the borders of Edom being rocky." The fact that they were so close to what they sought after, but not only were they so close to what they sought after, they had to go back. So like this was a point of discouragement. And so this is their biggest complaint at this point. So I'll reread that verse again. "And they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to compass the land of Edom," going around, "and the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way." Now I want you to keep in mind the passage that we mentioned in 7:26 of Proverbs. "For they have cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her." Okay, so we see the children of Israel in a point of wound. They're so close, but now they're discouraged. And that would be considered what I'd consider a point of wounding. And so that is the time to guard our hearts the most, right? This is where the strange woman, I talked about the blood being in the water, and she senses that. So this is when she's after you the most. It's when, as soon as you're discouraged, it's prime ground, right? And you get a little bit, so the children of Israel here are discouraged. And I want to say that this next portion, what we see is the children of Israel going through discouragement are disoriented. And that's a really big thing to think about, important thing to think about here, is because they become, through the discouragement and through our discouragement, we can see that in our lives, is that it disorients us and it causes us to, how they talk about the strange woman, which is strange being not familiar, obviously. And when we give into that, we ourselves will become strange. And so it disorients us. And that's what we're going to kind of dive into the next lesson, but a little bit in this one, we're going to set it up. So they had an ungrateful heart. Thinking about this, that's the nature of the children of the Hebrew children, is that it was a consistent, ups and downs. And so the ungrateful heart plagued them. And I think the ungrateful heart also plagues God's people today in a lot of ways. I think in our own lives, we can all be honest enough to say that is true. So through the disorienting of the strange woman, through the disorienting of discouragement, you get in this mindset of self-loathing, and you get in this mindset of because you're so enamored with your own woes, truth becomes distorted and you become disoriented. And Proverbs lays that out quite a bit, and we'll go over that later. But Numbers 21:4, continuing this idea with Moses. "And they journeyed from, I already went to that one. I'm sorry, verse 5. "And the people spake against God." That's the first thing they did, right? So they were discouraged because of the way. They had to go back, and they had to go through this route that they had already taken, and that discouraged them. And so through that disorienting process, And the people spake against God, in verse 5 of Numbers 21, and against Moses. Wherefore have ye brought us up to Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth the light bread. Now that's something interesting, because what they refer to is the light bread, right? So there is no bread. Well, they do have bread. Neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth this light bread. Okay? They're talking about the manna, right? And I think that's an interesting description, because I think when you begin to become poisoned by the discouragement, the wounds, she's subtle. The strange woman is subtle and sneaks right in there and starts to manipulate your mind, and you become disoriented, not being able to distinguish truth. And you're seeing that in this story, because they're saying, our soul loatheth this light bread. Now, let's go back to Exodus 16:31. This is a far cry from the original description of manna. And the house of Israel called the name thereof manna, and it was like a coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. It's an interesting description when we first see manna in Exodus, and now we go to Numbers, and now their souls are loathing this light bread. And they call it. They don't call it manna. They're saying it's this light bread. So again, the application here is obvious, and we've seen it, time and time again. The idea that we are manipulated by our own grievances, and we are manipulated and disoriented by our own discouragements. And so wisdom begins to leave our minds, and foolishness begins to creep in. And through that, our minds, our attitudes, our demeanors, that which we loved, we now hate. That's which we now, cherished, which is truth, wisdom, we now despise, and we start to murmur against those we love. And so you see the children murmuring against God. Not only God, but they murmur against Moses. And it's interesting when someone falls away, or when someone is walking and has tasted of the heavenly, so begins to just backslide or dissipate. They begin to loathe the things of God, or at least loathe their first love, and they loathe, and they'll go so as far as to loathe those around them, which was once sweet, right? Which was once we loved and once we cherished and was our heartbeat, now becomes our enemy and our foe. And that's what you're seeing here, is this idea. But remember what we had described earlier with the children, or with Moses and his disbelief in God. God said they're going to hearken, and Moses immediately says they're not going to hearken. God revealed the serpent. And the same thing happens here in verses 21:5. And the people spake against God and against Moses. Wherefore have ye brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth this light bread. And the Lord sent fiery serpents. So we see the serpents once again among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. It's really important, that word much, because that means a lot. Abundantly is what it actually means. You had all this murmuring and this complaining, and God plays second fiddle to no one here. And so he sends these fiery serpents. Now, many believe that this was what is called the saw-scaled viper, which another word is the carpet viper. The carpet viper is only like 1.5 feet, but it's just so small. But it's one of like the 4 deadliest serpents in that part of the country. And so when you think about all this great magnitude of people in the wilderness and beginning to murmur, and God sending these fiery serpents, right? He didn't create them, right? These weren't some supernatural serpents, but they came out of the ground and they were revealed, and much like Moses and the serpent and the rod. And so now you have these tiny little serpents, this great nation in the wilderness, and the serpent's small enough to hide in your shoe. Like, they are so small. It's crazy how small they are, but their heads are pretty wide, and they're horrifying looking, but they pack a punch. one of the four deadliest snakes in that part of the world. So, but it was, they were so numerous and so small, they could hide just about anywhere. I would believe that these are very similar serpents, because it wasn't like these massive serpents to contend with. You can hide from those and smash those. I think that the reason it was taking out so many of these individuals is because the serpent was so small. In the allegory there in our own lives, and what the serpent represents is, quite a story in and of itself. But that many people were dying, though. Quick things about the serpent: the saw-scaled serpent bite. It raises your temperature, so you get really hot. But not only that, you can't quench your thirst no matter how much water you drink. So all this complaining about not having water, the serpent bites them and their skin just becomes hot, but it also stops your skin from coagulating. So upon the bite and from the venom wounds, it's constant blood flow, because blood will not allow to coagulate, which I believe is most venom bites. So the venom stops the process of blood clotting and harms the body tissue, starts to eat at your tissue, which is venom bites. It can also cause permanent damage or loss of an organ in some cases. A venomous viper bite causes bleeding at the bite from the nose, blood vomiting, and cerebral hemorrhaging, that's my brain, leading to a quicker death. So bleeding from your nose, vomiting up blood. That is what the Hebrew children were witnessing at this time. So that's important to think about. Just put yourself in their shoes. Like, these aren't fabricated stories. This type of serpent that is hiding anywhere that you can't detect because it's so small has such a powerful bite that, imagine what, as parents, what would that do to your mind with your children? How much fear that would cause. 21:7. Therefore the people came to Moses. Interesting, their enemy became their friend again. That who they were backbiting becomes the first person they run to. And I think death has a way of waking people up in a lot of ways. And the Lord said unto Moses, 21:7, therefore the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. They wanted the serpents to be gone. They were so enamored with the pain that it was causing, the abundant death that it talks about, the many people dying. I imagine some of these people that were coming to Moses pleading with him had lost children. They had maybe lost parents, had lost spouses, brothers, sisters, whatever it is. They had lost their loved ones. They've seen the people around them dying in large numbers because of this sin. And so they said, please just take away the serpent. Just get the serpent out of here, is what they're begging Moses. So they're saying, go to the Lord, ask him to take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. There's a beautiful picture of the man of God in our lives, and that is the people that stay firm in the faith, in how we see people turn away from God and begin to loathe that which God gave them, loathe that which God had blessed them with, which was once in their life a huge rock or a huge blessing, now becomes this point of loathing. The manna becomes just light bread, and now death is at their front door, and the first thing they do is they come back to what God gave them. Once death is at your front door, that's when I think the strange woman backs off. And I say the strange woman, I mean sin, not sin, but evil. That which pulled you towards their sin nature, and that which pulls you towards what has brought about death begins to just back off, because you're already dead. And so anyway, we see this point where they're able to see clearly for just a moment, and they beg Moses to please ask God to take away the serpents. Now, 21:8, the Lord said unto Moses, so Moses is praying for the people, right? No grudges. He's praying for the people. Numbers 21:8, and the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. So he's telling Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, set it upon a pole. Now this is a bronze serpent, which he'll explain in a minute. But he says, make an image of this serpent. That's the thing, is he doesn't say, set it upon a pole. He says, set it upon a pole after you make the bronze serpent. Set it upon a pole, that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. Now, they ask God to take away the serpents. The thing is, God doesn't take away the serpent, but he gives these people an escape from death. So the image that we see here is quite an interesting one, because why a serpent? Why couldn't God just take away the serpents? Why couldn't God just say, if they come to you, Moses, and you pray for them, they will not die? No, God said that which bit them and that which caused them damage, the very image of what has killed so many people, in the very thought of this serpent being what they had to look at. Just like Moses in the rod, Moses ran from it, distancing himself from it. God says, pick it up. Pick up your serpent. And it's the same image here as how these people, these complaining children, were now having to look at the very thing that caused them so much pain. But not only that, it had to be raised up on a pole. Now, this is also an image of Christ. Christ even references as being raised up as Moses did with the serpent in the wilderness. God makes it so that you, instead of running from this issue, God gives them a way of deliverance from death. And through that, it is to look upon the serpent, to look at it. And that's the same thing, Moses, pick up your serpent. I look at that as a very similar analogy. And that is, you loathed that which you loved. And the word, even in the Bible itself, when you are not with the Lord, to look upon the Bible when passing by it, when you're in the midst of all your sin, or in the midst of that which is pulling you away, being happily deceived through your grumbling, whether that they're grumbling, their discouragement, the disorienting of their mind, they begin to hate all that is good. And so the farther you are from the closer you are towards this strange woman, the more you hate righteousness. And so the first thing God tells these people to do is look at it. Look at the serpent. This is what's caused you so much pain. And you're going to be bitten. That's the other thing too, and Moses made the 21:9, and Moses made a serpent of brass and put it upon a pole. And it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. Doesn't mean he was cured. It doesn't mean that he was healed. It doesn't mean that he got to depart from the serpents. The serpents were to leave them. It was the fact that, no, this is life, and this is what you are being dealt with, right? These serpents aren't leaving anytime soon. You're going to be bitten time and time again, but now I'm going to give you a way of deliverance from death. But you have to look at it. Spiritually speaking, when we look at this, that which pulls us from our first love disorients us in such a way that we begin to hate everything that represents good. In every aspect of life that was once cherished by us when we walked with the Lord, that is our church, that is our brethren, that is our spouses. In a lot of cases, when we see this idea of Proverbs being the adulteress, being the adulteress, everything is done in reference in regards to adultery. When a man forsakes fatherhood, when a man leaves the paths of righteousness, he will embrace untruth, and he will forsake truth. That person that has been so disoriented by sin, so disoriented by their flesh and the serpents, how do we get out of that? And that's the big thing. that we're going to focus on next. And I don't want to get too far into that, because that's what I want to talk about, is that when in her clutches and when in the grasp of the strange woman, you don't realize you're in her grasp. You don't really realize, you're so disoriented that you just have this anger and this hate towards that which is righteous and that which is good. But you don't really realize you're being deceived. It's just like the serpents that are among the people biting them. There's no time gap for how long the serpents were there before they came to Moses. Who knows how long in stubbornness? I'm assuming a while, because that many people had to die, where it was to be spoken that much died, right? So it took enough time that a lot of people had to die before they came to Moses. And the numbers were dwindling. I don't even know where I was going with that, but that's something to think about. But you become so disoriented. You become so spiteful and bitter and angry. And that precious part of our life that would keep us going and keep us to the point where we're embracing truth. And I really equate this to family. Your spouse is a big one. And I know it's not applicable. I'm just saying, it's personally speaking, you know, I've seen this over and over again, where the marriage is the first thing to fall apart when a man doesn't pick up his serpents and contend with them and call them, just like Moses, God said, you know, in the burning bush, and there's as a burning bush, right? And this is a symbol of light, and this is a symbol of truth, and this burning bush is a symbol of the Holy Spirit. And that the man has to look at the serpent. He has to pick up that serpent and give it to wisdom, give it to light. He has to raise it up, because that's what he told him to do, is pick it up. And so the hardest thing to do is contend with a serpent, because of the shame that comes with it, the fear of what the fallout might be, the pride, whatever it is. These are things that are distracting us from what is meant for us, and it's deceiving us to think that we can't pick up that serpent. We'll never be able to pick up that serpent. We'll never overcome it. But God commands every one of us to pick it up, to look upon it. This is what's causing the damage. This is what has caused many before you to fail. This is what's caused those around you to be hurt. And if you don't pick it up, the serpent will continue to run loose in the camp, and it will continue to bite and kill. And just like the story that we read last week about the man that endured through the night in his house with the serpent inside of him, if the serpent kills you, the next thing it comes for is your children. It comes for your wife. It breaks the family apart. And so that is the ultimate goal. But the problem is you are so disoriented that you don't even know up from down. You don't even have the ability to see right from wrong. And so you can't even contend with the serpent, because you're not even around wisdom anymore. You don't have the tools. But not only that, this is the thing, is it's not that you don't have the tools. That's not the right way to word that. But what it is that you can't even see it. That is what it is. And so you can't even see that this is what is tearing your family apart. This serpent is what is tearing your family apart, which is why you have to pick it up. You can't see it though. And that's the big thing that I want to get. This is the prelude to what's kind of the next lesson is going to be, is why you can't see it. And the strange woman has everything to do with this. And, we're going to build this character that is the strange woman, understanding too, is that I know that it's not a physical person. I am well aware that is allegorical, and we'll get into what all the layers of the strange woman are. But I want to create this character so that we can see it in that light. It helps me, like I said before, I'm a visual person, it helps me see it, helps me understand it. And so understanding what this strange woman does I'm going to leave it at that. but what she creates that allows that well, I'm gonna stop. I'll stop there because I really want to talk about it. I'm actually probably too excited about it, but because of what it is doing in my mind, for potential future projects that we could work on. But this idea that the strange woman can disorient you, and why it is so important for you to stop today and pick up your serpent and contend with it. That is your serpent, and it is what is going to, it is there for you to contend with so that you can overcome it. And once you overcome it, it will become your staff through life. It'll become the rod of God as Moses was. And it'll become the rod that buds. And when your children struggle, and your children's children struggle, that rod, that serpent that you picked up that has become the rod, will bud life-giving substance. And that'll be your testimony. And through that testimony, your children's children, or your children, or others unrelated, are going to look at your testimony and say, I can pick up my serpent. They're going to get that life-giving substance, those almonds, that fruit that your life bears is fruit for others to watch and say, I can do the same thing. And so I love this idea of the serpents, and the idea of picking up your serpents. And I think it's very plain in scriptures to see that that's what we are to do, but also how it applies to Proverbs. And I'm also excited to share more with you. I really am excited to share with you guys in the next lesson some of the things the Lord has shown me. And I'm, none of this is too deep, but I'm very visual, and it's poetic, and it's allegorical, and that's where I thrive, and that's where I see things the clearest, when I can put faces to some of these things. So hope this was a blessing to you. Thank you so much for your time. Pray for everyone. We are a body that needs prayer right now with sickness going through, and we are taking this break because we love each other, and we don't want to see this progress any worse than it is or needs to be. So for that reason, we have, made decisions to watch out for each other because we love each other. So love you all. We're praying for you guys all, for everyone. And we will see you on the next one, or maybe in person, or maybe on another one of these. Who knows?